This episode of Living Corporate is brought to you by Blind. Blind is a trusted community of more than 5 million verified professionals from startups to some of the largest companies in the world like Amazon, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, Goldman Sachs, Google, JP Morgan, Meta, and more. Blind's mission of transparency seeks to break down professional barriers and silos at work so that you can make productive change and advance your career. It's a safe space to ask questions and get the real-time insights and perspectives from people who know what you've been through. On Blind, you can connect and have honest discussions about everything from compensation, company culture, performance reviews, promotions, and more. You can also join your exclusive private company channel to chat with your coworkers about company policies and what's really going on at work. And because it's anonymous, you can be honest and trust what you read on Blind. Download and install Blind from the App Store or visit teamblind.com to get access to the latest salary, company reviews, and interview experiences at thousands of companies worldwide.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Break Room. We are a podcast about Black mental health in the workplace. And today I am hosting solo dolo, but I'm so excited to have a guest. So I am Dr. Nikki, a licensed psychologist with SIPAC credentials here in the state of Texas. And I work exclusively with Black women and couples around relational and sexual wellness. And I also do racial equity consultation and training for small to mid-sized organizations. And so if you are new to the break room, welcome. If you are an old head, welcome back. We're excited to be rolling through season 3. And this is a conversation we're going to have today that I've been wanting to have for a while now, because it is so integral to my life, and just how I orient myself in the world. So I'm really excited to talk to a scholar about this. And today's topic is about code switching. So if you are a Black and a brown person who's lived in America for any significant part of your life, you know exactly what code switching is. It's an inherently lived experience, but I'm so excited to have Dr. Monique Mills, who is Associate Professor of Communication Sciences and Disorders at the University of Houston. Go Cougs. And she and I had the privilege of knowing each other. I guess we were university colleagues when I was still at the university. And I just always found I found language and communication very interesting, probably because I'm a therapist and words are really important. People's narratives are really important. And so I've been wanting to talk to Monique about her work in any specific detail. And so today I get to do that. So welcome, Monique. Do you prefer Dr. Mills? We want to be wholly respectful. Okay. You're welcome. So just so you know, Monique, what we usually do is start the show with a little bit of the tea because we are in the break room, right? And so we want to talk a little bit about something a little controversial, I think. So this movie called Honk for Jesus came out probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm not sure if it had a wide theater release, but I know it's available for streaming on Peacock. And by the way, we don't get any kickback from any of this, so I'm just naming platforms that it's hosted on. And so I found the movie really exciting and thought-provoking. It made me uncomfortable in some really good ways. Like, I love a film that makes you simultaneously be entertained, but also have to think about some stuff. Like, you have to adjust your position to the content of the film. And there were times when I was watching it where I was like, I kind of want to laugh, but also I feel like, no, I do not want to laugh. Yes, very cringy. And so I have a different experience because I'm not a Christian. I don't attend church. I sort of grew up in the church because I'm a Black woman from the South, but I wasn't heavy like I know a lot of people are. Like, it wasn't Bible study twice a week or, and I would attend Sundays regularly. I kind of got kicked out of Sunday school as a kid for asking too many problematic questions. So I have a different lens with it overall, right? But I know that a lot of folks that are adherent Christians and people that attend Black churches in particular have had some strong opinions about it. It's kind of especially the elders in the community, I think, have been fired up. What were your thoughts about it?
Listen, I did grow up in the church, Sunday school, Wednesday night Bible study, at church all day, every week, did miss, right? And I still appreciated the truth that this film conveyed. It was uncomfortable to watch, but it wasn't the film that made me uncomfortable. It was the actions of the actors in the film. And as far as I can tell, don't quote me on this, but I think it's based on a true story. And so for people in the church to be this concerned about power and prestige and to take advantage of people who, I believe Christ would want us to embrace, young men and to take advantage of them and sexually and otherwise manipulate them for your own gain is grotesque. It is perverted, and so it wasn't Peele, Jordan Peele that made me cringe. It was actually the true actions of someone who claimed to be a man of God, and it was interesting because it was sort of told from the pastor's wife's lens.
Yes. So to be clear, it was Sterling K. Brown. That's in the multiverse, that is my husband. So I just want to make sure to name the actor. Going into the film, I guess because I have such high esteem for him, and I knew it was going to be about the pastor. I really expected him to be the focal point, but really Regina Hall is the focal point.
Yes.
She is.
And she carried, that was Oscar worthy, that performance.
Absolutely.
My little cousin reached out to me after she'd watched it because she knows that I grew up in the church and she didn't. And she was just like, what do you think about this? And she wondered, her question was the wife stupid? And I think that the film showed her as being very, very aware of what was going on and very willing to play a part in ensuring that the church got back on track after the scandal, ensuring that her investment, she would have a return on her investment in this man, in this ministry, and so forth. And I personally didn't think it was like, oh, she didn't know she was stupid,
I think that's a really important point, because I hear this narrative a lot in the Black community that if you're quote unquote smart, then you make smart choices. But as a psychologist, I'm fully aware that there's lots of smart people that make decisions that are way layered, complicated, nuanced, that may on some ways not look like they align with their own ethics or values, but they make the decision, right? And I think she's a very complicated character. And I just thought Regina Hall did. I think she's an extremely underrated actress. But I thought that her subtlety is really what the story is about. But I like your point. And I think the thing about the power of the film is that it is an indictment on the Black church as an institution, and that every institution has the capacity to create corruptible power. Our institutions are structured in a hierarchical manner by and large. And as long as you put somebody up on a pedestal, it is very easy to lose sight of reality, right? And it's very easy to exploit that position. And that is exactly what they did.
That's what they did. And that is what we have to name and stop trying to be like, don't touch God's anointed. Da, 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 da. Yes. Was he really God's anointed? I mean, I don't, even if he was a fallible human, and you call people out on their stuff,
Yes. I mean, this man clearly had done wrong, right? So
repeatedly.
and was still doing it in the middle of the Like
And
clearly this is a pattern.
listen, the delusion though. I don't want to spoil it for your listeners who haven't watched, but the delusion in that one scene that people were actually gonna show up.
Yes. Yes.
That shows you
Committed.
how far pride will take you, how far it
100%.
will have you blind and deaf to your own actions, to other people. So I was just like, wow, this film really captured that. And that's what I appreciate. Do I want to watch it again? No, because it was gross.
It was uncomfortable. So if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's controversial, like, to be clear. And I think, but I get really excited too about the fact that it's a Black film. There's a Black woman screenwriter, Black woman director. I think she's a woman. I made the assumption. I don't actually know.
Jordan Peele is a male.
Oh, I thought it was this person, Adama. I'll go back and look. We'll clarify.
Oh yeah, maybe I have it wrong.
Yeah. But it's hard to get Black films made that are expansive in storytelling. Like that I love that it's documentary style. I love that it's a little bit quirky.
Yeah.
I love that it's sort of a small cast. Like it is really story narrative driven. So that excites me as a Black film goer to see us be able to sort of take more space in those spaces. So
yeah.
Go check it out. Honk for Jesus.
Listen.
Let's jump into it. Are there any things you want to share with our audience just about who you are, your work, before we sort of get into the meat of it? We will for sure put your full bio in the show notes.
Yes.
But I'd like people to introduce themselves. Tell us what you want us to know about you.
What you don't know from my bio is that I'm a Chicago native and I'm an avid bid whist player. So that's the only thing that's missing. I should update my bio to include those
You really
features.
should.
Yes, but I was trained as a speech language pathologist, and I think that's important because the word pathology is in that term. Mm-hmm. So I was trained to examine language and look for what is wrong so that we can assess and treat it. And I think so many of my colleagues in my field of communication sciences and disorders hear certain codes and alarm bells go off. Like, ooh, that doesn't sound right. It sounds erroneous. But that's who I am before. I don't want to jump in too far.
Yeah. I love that. And so your work primarily centers around children, school-age children, right?
Yes, elementary school-age children, grades 2 through 5. That has been where my interests have been mostly. I've been characterizing the spoken language of African American English speakers who are typically developing, and I operationalize that by their being in a general education classroom versus gifted. Being placed in a gifted education classroom. And I know you're wondering, like, well, why are you a speech pathologist and you're not looking at special education? Mm-hmm. Well, I think I was really interested in characterizing the language performance of African American English speakers across the ability spectrum and not just at the low end. And basically the overarching question of my research is concerned about the Black-white achievement gap. So why are there gaps in achievement between Black children and their white and Asian American peers? And what role does language play, if at all, in those gaps?
Interesting. Let me ask a follow-up question just to see if I have an assumption. I want to see if it's right. I think it's really important that you said you wanted to look at language ability across the, I'm going to say developmental spectrum. Yes. And is that in part driven by the fact that, there may be some inherent why can't I say the word? Pathologizing. My God. Inherent pathologizing around Black children's speech as embedded in sort of systemic scientific racism, really.
Right. So why is there an overrepresentation of African Americans in special education, but an underrepresentation in gifted education? And so when we talk about achievement gaps, my work is talking about achievement gaps at the high end of that spectrum. And sort of it's the flip side of the same coin. We're looking at why, if there's a tracking system in place, period, right? Why are Black kids only at the lower end of that tracking system, as opposed to being represented equally across each of the domains of, special ed, general ed, and then gifted ed.
Absolutely.
And so I was really interested in showing, I'm better understanding what the role of language variation is in being able to place Black kids in the correct educational placement. And so in my work, I did show that, children in the gifted classroom, they produce fewer features of African American English than do Black children in the general education classroom. But what I couldn't do is explain why that was. So what I did observe was in the general education classroom, kids were with other Black kids for the most part in the context that I was examining in Central Illinois. But in the gifted education classroom, that was like the United Kingdom. That was a very racially and socioeconomically diverse group of children. So I don't know if gifted kids have greater cognitive flexibility or awareness of, okay, I have to, maybe I am an African American English speaker, but I'm speaking to somebody from Pakistan. So I need to be able to accommodate them linguistically. And so maybe that's why they're using fewer of their home dialect features and, shifting over to something that is more of what you would expect in what the school privilege is, which is mainstream American English.
Okay, so I want to get into that, and I want to I'm thinking about folks in the workplace as adults across the lifespan. But before we get in that, can you just take us a step back, and what is the academic definition of code switching?
Okay, so first, what is a code? A code, simply put, is a set of rules, right? So there's codes for lots of different things. In my world, code switching is a sign of rule knowledge. It's a practice common among people who are bilingual, switching between two languages. It's also part of being bidialectal, where speakers understand and employ the rules governing two varieties of the same language, as is the case with African American English and mainstream American English. So code switching is the ability to move between two languages or two language varieties, two or more, I should say.
Two or more. And the other piece that has always been, so let me say this. I'm going to lay my biases out. I am an advocate of code switching. I am proud that I have the capacity to code switch because of this cognitive flexibility piece. And so what I'm hearing when you talk about is rules is I have to be aware of when and where and how to apply the rules in an appropriate way. And I'm sort of making those decisions moment by moment.
Yes.
On the, I'm not quite unconsciously, but definitely without a lot of cognitive effort put into making that decision.
Right. And I want to complicate that because I actually pride myself on also having a command of African American English and mainstream American English. But, at the beginning of our time together, you said we're in the break room, so we're going to spill some tea. So tea spilling is appropriate for the break room, right? Is it appropriate for the workroom? You know what I mean? And so that you set up the whole context of we are in an informal context, and in this informal break room, we can relax, we can just, rant, we can do whatever we need to, be emotionally well. So even though code switching doesn't cost you anything cognitively, it's a sign of, cognitive flexibility. For some people, it costs them emotionally.
Say more.
So, the whole idea is, who has to code switch, who gets to code switch and who doesn't, right? Some people can go through their entire day and life just being who they are, bringing them their authentic selves, their authentic language, their accent. Everybody has a thick foreign accent, right? It's all relative. And they can speak in their accent. They can use the words they want. They don't have to overthink whether something sounds erroneous or not. And some people, don't have that luxury. So not having the code switch it shows that there's a power differential.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that is the part where scholars from education, scholars like April Baker Bell, who just wrote this gorgeous book on linguistic justice, is pushing back on anti-Black linguistic racism,
Mm-hmm.
and naming it as such, as a way to denigrate people of color without coming at the race, but by proxy coming at our language.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So that it's complicated. It's politically charged.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way around it. On one hand, it's a resource. It's the way toward upward mobility in any corporate space, academic in an academic space, right? And on the other hand, it's it's a resource to maintain your home dialect, your community language as well.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to move between and among different racial groups, cultural groups, that's a resource. That is a sign of linguistic intelligence, in my opinion. And at the same time, some people are tired of having to do that, feeling like they have to do that, feeling undervalued. So, I think
it is layered. And I think this is why I've been excited to have this conversation in the break room in this context, right? Because being able to use the language of the folks that are in power, is an indication of sometimes safety, right? Like, can we trust you to be in this level of power with us? It's an indication of your intelligence. It's like it's almost the inverse of what you're saying, right? From the white gaze, the perspective is the more that you can use standard American English, the more intelligent you are. And then there's a sort of performative element too. And I think that I don't know of Black folks that are able to be successful across a wide variety of industries, professions, without having some representation of themselves show up, right, at work. And then there is a cost, right? If you work in a workspace where you never get to do that, then you're constantly in this position of performing and like speaking in a language that is not yours.
Right. It's not the most comfortable. It's not your first or native tongue, right? So I at my first institution, I kind of went through this because I was fearful of bringing my authentic voice into the workspace. I was in a predominantly white institution. And since I've come to the University of Houston, I am in a very different environment. My students look very different from what they did at my predominantly white institution. And I find myself bringing more of my knowledge of Spanish, more of my knowledge of African American English into the classroom, and that it's going over well. And that reinforces me to be able to code switch in that context. And so that's been great to be able to feel comfortable enough. And I guess it took a level of me feeling competent in my own identity as a teacher to do this. But it's really, it makes the learning environment more relaxed for the students and for me.
Yes.
And that's important because so many of our students, college students across the nation and across different types of colleges, are facing unprecedented, mental wellness challenges. And so are their instructors.
Yes. Oh, 100%.
So if you can make the learning environment one that's relaxed and full of humor and grace, then that's wonderful.
I want to go back for a second to some of your research findings you were talking about. And I'm thinking about, you talked about, so let me make sure I heard it right. Black kids that are in gifted settings tend to use standard American English more consistently. And part of your speculation around that is because there's more racial, ethnic, linguistic diversity in those settings rather than the general education.
Right. That's one potential answer. The
Okay.
other answer is maybe the gifted kids possess within their own minds a greater ability to manipulate the language code than do children with in the general education population.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take giftedness seriously, then you might speculate that gifted kids, of course, they're going to be better, at all things or a number of things than a kid who doesn't have that same intellectual prowess.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, there's two ways you can go with this. You can go with the nurture or the nature.
Gotcha.
The nurture is these are people who there's a need to linguistically accommodate their classroom setting because there's people from all over the world in one place. So you want to kind of arrive at something that is neutral. And then the other argument is, they just have a better facility with, language. And so they're going to be better language users. They're going to know how to manipulate language, depending on who they're speaking to and where they are. So
I was thinking about the sort of the first piece around the social. I'll talk about it from like a social lens, right? Because that's what I'm hearing. It's like the social environment is different, and that's a factor to be considered. And so it makes me think about this argument around diversity and inclusion in the workplace, right? That's a huge, like, you can't be a credible Fortune 500 company and not talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, right?
Oh, DEA is so sexy right now.
It's all the things. And so one of the arguments around that is like diversity of folks in the environment equates to diversity of thought in the environment. And that benefits everyone, right? So it's like what is that saying? A rising tide lifts all boats sort of framework. And so to me, that makes it more interesting to think about what could be the potential benefit of code switching in a diverse workplace versus a less diverse workplace, right? So there's more social protection maybe when there are other folks like critical mass, right? So and then I'm also thinking like on the psychological level, if there are places, so I'll speak for me personally, right? When I worked at U of H, let me back up and say this. I'm pretty versatile in my code switching. I think in part, my neurodiversity doesn't allow me always to sort of fully be objective and like, oh no, that I shouldn't talk in a certain way, right? And then I went to graduate school in a space that facilitated me being able to sort of speak more plainly, even though it was a predominantly white environment. Not that there weren't consequences, right? Because there were times where I definitely felt like my points were being dismissed or undermined because I wasn't speaking in standard American English. So there's definitely psychological costs around that. But for me, it's kind of like a password, right? Like if I can find, when I'm in an environment and I see other Black folks and then we can code switch, that creates a sense of psychological safety for me. And it's equally discomforting for me when I have conversation with other Black folks in certain spaces who don't code switch, because I'm like, I don't know how to I don't know how to respond and navigate that.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's maybe what the kids in the general education classroom, since they are in a safe space where everybody is from the same neighborhood, they're from the same racial group, they might live around the corner from each other, so it's more family, so they don't necessarily need to move out of that out of one code and switch into another code. But on the other hand, in the gifted classroom, they have less of that camaraderie, if you will, that cultural camaraderie. And, what I didn't study is what is the cost of not having the cultural camaraderie.
Yeah.
Because I fully understand what you mean. With when you just see another Black person, you just automatically go into the mode. It doesn't matter that we both have our PhDs or whatever. It's just like, sister,
hey, what's up, sis? How's it going? Like it's immediately, it's home, right? There's a relaxation that happens automatically. And I was thinking about my own daughter, and that, so she's biracial, and I always say biracial, bi-ethnic. So her dad's Mexican American. And so, but she lives with me. I'm the primary parent. So her context is Black. And so it was really important for me for her to have access to that ability to code switch. And so I remember the first time I heard her doing it when she was maybe in pre-K. And I was like, yes, like it was like, okay, the socialization is working. And so now she's in an environment, she's in 5th grade. But she's in a predominantly Latinx environment. And so that's new for her. A couple weeks ago, she was like, Mom, I made a, mistake in math. And before I even realized it, I was like, ay, Dios mío.
So now she's bilingually code switching and bidialectally code switching.
I was like, this is the dream, right? That like I would like for her. And I shared that. I want her to have repertoire, and I also think it's connected to identity, right? I want her to know that all of that lives within her, and she has access to all of that for her. And when thinking about, there's been some research in the therapy literature around bilingual therapy, and really this argument around who, on the therapist side, who should be doing bilingual therapy and who shouldn't. And a recognition that for folks that are non-native English speakers, there's processing that happens on an emotional level, a psychological level that cannot be translated verbatim in English, right? And I think the same thing can be true for parts of African American English as well.
Yes, there's certain tones that, just even those like almost non-verbals that,
yes.
I don't know, for me, I needed, when I felt the need, of course, during the pandemic, to reach out for some support with my mental wellness, I definitely looked for an African-American therapist, someone who I don't have to onboard about the Black experience or Black experiences, shall I say, because you alluded to the fact that all Black people do not have African-American English as their native dialect. I mean, because we all come from different regions, we all come from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different experiences. So there's no essential, Black experience, but we are definitely a diverse group. And so I needed to make sure that, that would be in place. And so I think I found someone who speaks African-American English. She gets it, so that's important for wellness.
Yes.
To feel heard and to feel validated in some of your experiences.
100%. And I feel that way as the therapist. Like for me, when I'm starting to work with new clients and when they began to just show, I know that we have built rapport when they are able to speak in African American English. Like when they have fully like, girl, let me tell you. And like, my favorite is when they're like, girl, and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, Dr. Nikki. And I'm like, no, we're good. Like, yes, give it to me. This is what I want.
Now you're speaking in your authentic voice. Now we have, social capital, shared expectations and trust. So that's awesome.
It's awesome. So I will ask this one last question to sort of think about the other side, right? So we've been talking more about the experiences of people who code switch and the benefits and challenges around that. Is there any part of your work or from your expertise in this area that you think the folks who are on the other side, folks who don't code switch, who are recipients of or have to interact with folks who code switch, but they don't do that they should know? Like, what do we need to be thinking about in terms of creating more inclusive, equitable spaces in the classroom education setting, workplace, for folks that have this sort of versatile way of communicating? I'm thinking about the concept of professionalism.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what does that mean?
Professionalism is itself a code, and I think we need to be clear about that. I mean, I know that some of my colleagues in education talk about the hidden curriculum. We need to make things that are hidden explicit. If there is a certain way that of communicating that is valued in this space, we need to be explicit about that as we validate, you know, the funds of knowledge and the creativity around, around expressions that children bring into the classroom space. And I'm here starting with the elementary school level because that's where my work resides. But if I scale it up to, adults, if these, I think we just need to realize that term professionalism, she's unprofessional or she is professional. We need to interrogate, what do we mean by that? And then codify it, explicitly. What we mean by professionalism is this, this, and this. Who gets to determine what the rules are? Who's writing the rules of professionalism? Are the rules of professionalism sufficiently dynamic? So when I was being trained as a speech pathologist, we had to wear pantyhose and they were, quote, nude. My nude wasn't everybody else's nude. But
wait
now,
a minute, Monique, like, you're not that old, right? And you were,
but seriously, this was in 2002. We were wearing pantyhose and, and so that's shifted, what is acceptable in a professional workspace, it changes over time. And now is an opportunity, given all of the DEI movement, for us to interrogate, what does it mean to be professional in our academic spaces? I mean, students in communication sciences and disorders used to be written up for having hair that is in their face, big hair, who does that penalize and who does that privilege?
yes.
So we have to get serious about our own codes, our own rules, written or unspoken or otherwise, and really see how we are systematically marginalizing some people and privileging others. And professionalism, just like code switching, it's a resource and it's a burden.
Yes.
Yes,
absolutely.
But I think being clear about the expectations and then interrogating our own ideologies around language, our beliefs that there should be a standard that everybody rises to or falls to, or however you want to put it, that is ubiquitous. It's the air we breathe. And I think we need to figure out how these ideologies of language standardization, again, systematically marginalize some people and privilege other people. And, people talk about I'm going to end with this. I know I'm rambling,
No.
in my field, we have this thing called accent modification. And we often put international students who want to be speech pathologists through accent modification so that they begin to sound more like a mainstream American English speaker. Instead of having speaking labs to train people to change their accent, why don't we have listening labs? So we train our pre-service clinicians to be able to have an ear and an appreciation for different tones, for different ways to pronounce the same sentences. I mean, come on.
Yes, that part.
Let's do, I'm not saying throw the baby out with the bathwater, but let's add a level of complexity to capture cultural responsivity in whatever sector we're in.
Because that fundamentally is the equity component. And in my experience, in the broader DEI context, the equity piece is where it always falls down, because the equity is about shifting power. It's about reallocating power. And so if we are going to acknowledge that there is increasing scientific research that indicates that code switching is real, it's valid, it's normal, it's functional, it serves as a resource, right? Then the inverse has to be true. Then spaces, institutions are required to make spaces that acknowledge that fact.
And if people want to sound a different way and they elect, I'm an actress and I want to sound like I'm Southern, or I'm from whatever, that's speech pathologists can accommodate that elective service to sound more mainstream or standardized or sound less. But to have this crusade, this English only, standard English only, as the model is really outdated, and it doesn't serve us. Lastly, normal is not a point, it's a spectrum. And I think we need to widen what is normal. Language variation is normal. Most people in the world are bilingual, so in the US it's very politically charged context for 100%. Language diversity.
The U.S. can take anything and make it peculiar. We just have this capacity to make things more than they are. But I really love, that's going to be my take home quote for the week, is that normal is a spectrum. And I think we really have to, I think we are, the collective we are increasingly making space for that. But I think there's still a long way to go in terms of our institutions reflecting our evolving consciousness and understanding around the expansiveness of what is normative, what is normal for folks.
Yes, and Dr. Nikki, thank you for providing this space to allow a researcher like me to descend from her ivory tower and talk to real people about this, because that's part of my charge, right? Like I have to take ownership that I'm an introverted person. All I want to do is read and write. I don't want to be splashed across social media, but this is a platform that people who are outside of my niche area of expertise will listen to, and it'll go further than my classroom of 40 students. You know what I mean?
100%.
So thank you for inviting me. This has been fun.
You are so welcome. You are so welcome. Thank you. And you're welcome back anytime.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely anytime. And I love that you make that point, because I mean, in all of my years in academia, 9.5 out of 10 of the Black academics or BIPOC academics that I met were doing work to help facilitate space, safety, growth, resource development for our communities, right? Like, the reason why we get into the work is because we see something in our lived experiences and we have a different lens on it, where we want to be differently inquisitive about it to create more opportunity. So I love that you're doing this work. I'm glad we're just having this conversation. So thank you for coming. So we always end the break room with a rant, as you said, right? Because that's what we're here for. We're going to spill some tea and then we're going to talk about people that then got on our nerves. And so what I want to talk about too is, it's a little bit celebration, but also slightly rant. So the Emmy Awards just happened last week, and there were 4 Black women that won significant awards. Zendaya Coleman won for Best Actress in a Drama, Lead Actress in a Drama for the second time, which is the first time that has ever happened for a Black woman. Quinta Brunson won for writing for a comedy series. And Abbott Elementary is, if you've not watched that, get yourself together. Go watch it. It is hilarious. And then Cheryl Lee Ralph got her flowers. That's a whole nother conversation, right? About Black famous, right? That's a different type of code switching or access to knowledge and repertoire. But like, Black people been knowing Cheryl Lee Ralph and that she was all the things.
All
All of them. Like, so that she won for supporting actress in a comedy. And then Lizzo won in the role around, reality TV, I think. And Lizzo for sure did not. And Cheryl Lee Ralph did not code switch. Like Cheryl Lee Ralph got up there and belted a Diane Reeves song. And I was like, this is why they can't.
That was so
why they can't stand us.
Because why we like this. I love it.
I love it. I can't tell you with words. I'm going to tell you with this song, and I'm going to make you feel all the things I'm going to feel.
And people rose to their feet. Like it was just so dynamic. Yes. I enjoyed every bit of it.
So much energy. And Lizzo was like, I am who I am, and I'm going to say what I want to say, period. And so I love that for us. I'm excited about that for us. And part of my rant is going to go back to Jimmy Kimmel. Wow, and I know Quentin Brunson has said that it didn't bother her. And maybe it did not, right? Like maybe there is a personal relationship that she has that she's like, I'm really not bothered. I got my award, period. But it's the level of ignorance, like that you were so embedded in your own worldview that you didn't think to stop for a second and say, let me just roll my ass over. Like maybe you want to stay in the bit, roll over, move out and let her have her moment. And it just irritates me. It reminds me of, when the white director won for the Golden Globes and she had to call out Serena and Venus Williams about them not knowing about what it's like to be a woman and something like that. Look, we are phenomenal. If you give us the shot, we're going to shoot past any goal that you could ever have for us, because that is what we do. And we're going to do it with razzle dazzle. We're going to do it with a plum. We're going to do it with an energy that makes everybody else want to get on board. And so let us have that. Just be excited to be imparted to the party. That's it. Just be happy you get to be a front row witness. But take yourself out of it. You do not need to center yourself every time.
I mean, in what world is that okay? It wasn't.
It just was not. It just absolutely was not. Back in this might have been the 90s or 2000s, Halle Berry won an award, and that white man, Adrian Brody, just kissed her in the mouth without consent at the Oscars. So there's precedent, right? So clearly y'all are not learning or paying attention. So here's another opportunity for you to learn and for the next white man to do better. Just do better.
Yeah.
My goodness. Thank you again, Dr. Monique Mills. We appreciate you being here, sharing your expertise and your warmth and your passion about your work with us. And we'll see y'all next week from the break room. Peace.
Living Corporate is brought to you by Doximity. Over 90% of graduating medical students join Doximity to use our tools before earning their doctoral degree. As medicine's largest network, there's an elevated level of responsibility to everything we do. We don't take that responsibility lightly and are committed to working towards a more equitable world inside and beyond our virtual office walls. If you want to learn more about Doximity, make sure you go to your app store, type in DOXIMITY. That's DOXIMITY.